Welcome to the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shana, some of the Twinkle EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkle EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years. Hello, lovely listeners. It's Shana here from the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast, here with another great episode for you. And not just that, we're now starting another mini-series. So the next few episodes, if you're listening in order, is going to be all about communication and language. It is a massive topic in early years, of course, and we're really excited to bring you several episodes, breaking it all down, especially looking at the different age ranges and how it looks for different children at different development stages. So we're going to start off with Julia and Louise this week talking about communication and language, part 1. Let's take it away. Hi, Julia and Louise, back again to have another super cool conversation about early years. So today's topic, communication and language. I mean, let's start with a big one, shall we?
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. So we've split this series because we're going to do a series, aren't we, on communication and language. We're going to do 3 episodes. This is part 1. Just going to do sort of the brief overview because it's such a massive topic. We could honestly talk about it forever. And then we'll go into a bit more detail in the next one. It's ironic, isn't it? We're going to be talking about talking.
Definitely.
Okay, so first things first, and again, it's going to sound like a really obvious question, but it's not. Like when we're looking at early years as a whole, especially when we're looking at the development matters and what we have to, record against the children's attainment and things like that and their progress, what does communication and language actually mean?
It's a big question, really, because I mean, we interact with it, like you say, every single day, and we'll use those words every day. But it's so important to really dig into and have that kind of conversation about what it really means. I mean, communication and language is such an essential building block that impacts all areas of development and learning, and it develops so many skills that children continue to build on over time. And so communication itself kind of describes the way in which we interact with others and how we receive and pass on information or messages. I really like this phrase. I think Lou found the dance of communication. It's a really nice way to kind of almost think about it, because it can take many different forms, such as using gestures, movements, facial expressions, especially when children are really young and they're not yet speaking. And then as well as that, obviously, when they do start to speak, using the spoken or written words to express their kind of feelings, their needs, and their wants as well. So it encompasses lots of different elements. And then we've also got the concepts of listening and attention, speech sounds, which come later, as well as language, which we've split into kind of receptive language and expressive language. So if we go to listening and attention, that's also so important. It's something that, again, we talk about quite a lot, but it's a really active process, listening, and it's an important part of kind of hearing and understanding. So children will hear those sounds and then learn to interpret and respond to them. So it kind of involves a lot more than just what we think it does sometimes. I think it's a lot more complicated than initially just what we consider it to be, because it's a complex process kind of involving hearing, listening, and attention. The ability to recognize sounds, listening, the ability to understand and interpret them, and then attention, the ability to focus on them.
I mean, if you ask maybe someone who wasn't in early years or in education, they might, answer that question, what is communication language, with just, talking. And it's that is just the tip of the iceberg, my friend. When people sometimes say phonics, it's just learning to read and write. And you're like, no, there's an entire level below that. It's called pre-reading skills. Maybe want to go and look it up, our phonics scheme. I feel like it's one of those. And there's so many layers to unpack.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise as well that it started earlier than I thought. which is why we're kind of breaking it up into these episodes, aren't we? Because we're going to do a whole episode just on babies and toddlers and even pre-birth. I'm so excited to hear more about that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, such a fascinating process. And realizing, like you say, how early it begins, you start to see a little bit more of the journey and also appreciate how everything develops. I know that Lou loves writing all things baby.
Do I think the whole concept of how children start to develop their language from inside the womb is just massive. It's just so I just find it so fascinating and so exciting. And then obviously as soon as they're born, they're just hardwired to just get started with communicating in some form and learning how to respond to different things. So yeah, I can't wait for episode 2 where we focus on just babies.
That's so funny. I think Lou will be doing most of the talking for that one, which is fabulous. I'm very excited. I was thinking about this as well when we were, getting ready for the episode. I think it is also something that we take for granted quite a lot, because it's not just like a subject that you teach at school. This is quite literally a life skill that we depend on to function, and like you say, it's not just what we are giving out, whether we're talking or we're writing. It's about what also we're processing, and splitting that difference up between listening. Yeah, but there's two things to that. It's being able to hear and being able to process the meaning behind it. And there are so many things that come into that, isn't there? Especially perhaps if you've got children who are hard of hearing, or perhaps they are non-verbal and people think, they can't communicate. That is a very big misconception, because there's so much more to it than just one of those elements, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's just so many different subtle cues to language, isn't there? There's just the slight inflection in your voice.
Yeah.
There's how you might look when you're talking, and your pitch and your emphasis. Language is so subtle, and how we communicate that is just so complex. So yeah, it's something that can be just glazed over quite, just sort of like, oh, it's just talking, or we're just communicating now, but it's not just anything. It is much, much deeper than that.
It is, and that's why I think these episodes are so important. I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd anyway, because I did linguistics at university, so I love language,
Didn't know
love
that.
talking about it. Did you not?
No, I didn't know
No.
either.
Um,
Love that fact.
I am a professional linguist,
Look at
darlings.
that.
I have a degree. I know. It's funny that, because I talk out of my behind sometimes and you think, really? But I was going to point out as well that there isn't just only our episodes to talk about communication and language. Like I was saying earlier about the children maybe with, additional needs or different needs.
Yeah.
I have put in our episode description the link to our SEND podcast, Send in the Experts. Absolutely brilliant if you want some advice on communication and language or anything else for children with SEND, because we know communication and language is a big topic for them. And also our lovely friends on the EAL podcast, Talking Their Language, because obviously communication and language is key for them. So if you want more advice or just have a listen on expertise on those areas, go have a look in the bio, because you can go and look at their podcasts. But today we are going to do sort of the general subject overview. So we kind of want to move on to now, I would say, and again, sounds like an obvious question, but why is it so important for early years educators to look at communication and language as a topic of learning, especially as like it's a prime area? Like, why is it so important?
Okay, so as we've already mentioned, it is such a critical part of a child's development, and focusing on it is vital, essential. I don't know what the best word to use is, just to enable children to flourish in every aspect. And as they develop their communication and language skills, it supports them along a huge development journey. So if we're thinking about babies, for example, developing their communication from a really early age will help them to be able to express their needs, whether it's physical or emotional needs. They'll start to form attachments with caregivers or their key person from communicating with them. And then it sort of as they develop, it's developing social skills, learning to develop friendships and other attachments with other adults or children. And it develops their firm foundations for everything else to build on. And then as children sort of develop a little bit later on, communication and language is so important for exchanging information between others, with other people, understanding rules and ways to behave. And then it sort of does support their development of their confidence, their independence. There's so much developing their friendships. I've already mentioned that. And being able to communicate in different social situations and know some of the language that they could use to support that. And then as they get further along their journey, it's sort of communication and language supports them in initiating longer conversations. It might help them with their problem-solving skills. It might enable them to play cooperatively with others, start pretend play because they've developed that sort of side of language, and then developing their own narratives and eventually, communicating that into written forms. So yeah, it's huge. I mean, those are just some of the ways why developing communication language is so important, but really it just develops all aspects of a child's development. So that's why it's so important as a prime area, because it's everything else can sort of build from that.
Yeah, you're right. And as you was talking, I was just thinking back to when I was in schools and doing observations of my children. Every single one, when you list your areas of learning on the observation, like what areas are you observing, I always put communication and language in, no matter what, even if they weren't speaking, because it's impossible not to.
Yeah.
Because if they're doing an activity with a friend, they're using communication to interact with that friend, whether it's verbal or not. If they are doing maybe solo work, it would be then your role as the educator to sort of scaffold and support and find out, what it is they're doing in this solo play. So that would mean that they have to have some level of communication with you, but also communication with objects. And I know that sounds a bit like woo-woo, but there is a communication between them and what they're doing. There is that connection. And then also, I think you touched on something really big, Lou, that took me a while to understand, is context. Like, yes, of course, we can learn words, we can learn rules and things like that, but actually it depends on your situation, how you change, how you communicate. And I think that's look, let's be honest, most adults don't get that. Let's be honest. I sometimes struggle. But to be able for a child to not only understand the world around them, process, express all of that, there's that extra layer of, right, what communication skills can I use here? What can't I use here? And what about a different situation? I think context is probably something as well that a lot of people it's not even on their radar,
Definitely.
I think it shows an in-depth knowledge, especially of new vocabulary. It's something that a child really understands if they're able to use it in another context. Because if you're just using it and they're doing the same type of play again and they're using that word, and they're saying something is taller because they're just, I remember these blocks. You said that my tower was taller, so it's still taller. But if they're not using it in another context, you're not really sure how much they understand that new word, because they might just think, this is only associated to my block play. And it's when they actually show you in another way, saying, I'm taller than so-and-so. You're like, aha, nice. You've really processed that word and you're using it in different contexts. That's why it's so important for us to show and model the new vocabulary and things like that in contextual sense-making kind of situations.
And I was just going to add, which follows on very nicely from what Julia just said, is it is developing the neural pathways. Every time you're practicing that and making connections, you're actually growing your brain, which is why language and what Julia was just saying is so important, because those sort of contexts and using them in different ways, all of those are strengthening those neural pathways in a child's brain.
Yeah, it's massive. I have a vivid memory of when I was teaching. I don't know why, but for me, maths vocabulary always sticks out when it comes to this particular skill. I noticed that children use some words in the wrong context. So when you were talking about my tower's bigger, Julia, it sparked a memory of a little boy who understood, big and small, and tall and short.
Mm.
And we were then looking at length, and they were saying, oh, you know, this piece of string or whatever it
It was
was.
longer, maybe.
No, because I was expecting him to say longer, but he was saying it's taller.
Yeah.
And I was like, right, you've got the concept.
Yeah.
But it's just the wrong word. In this context,
Yeah.
it's called longer.
Yeah.
And I always found that really interesting for children, because it was like they got the word and then just thought, oh,
Yeah.
you know, that concept has just one word. And then when you
Mm.
really, like, if you really dig down deep in English, like,
I know, you start to
there's
question.
a million words for one concept. Yeah.
You're like, yes, why is it longer instead of
Yeah.
taller? You're like, please don't ask me. But that's the kind of question they would ask. And you go,
Why do we
good
have a million
question.
words for the rain?
Why do we have so many words for the rain? Yeah, because it rains so much. We
Yeah.
have to get creative with it.
Another thing to realize is that actually our world, our daily lives are surrounded by words all the time. And as adults, we use them confidently, but a child is trying to keep up with all of that language. So it can be quite overwhelming, can't it? So that's again another, we'll talk about that later on in another episode, about the role of an educator in terms of supporting that in stages, that access to language, because it can be completely overwhelming for the child otherwise.
Yeah, massively. Obviously, this is a really big, vast area. There's a lot to cover, a lot to look at, but we're not specialists in this. We're early years educators. You know, there's only so much training we can get, and we've got, you know, 6 other areas to learn about. But obviously, communication and language is so important. How do we as educators, or, you know, parents and carers, maybe spot where there's a lack of communication and language development, or, you know, what happens if there is? Like, what impact does that have?
I mean, it has a huge, huge impact on children, and I think a lot of early years educators see this when children are starting at their settings, because I think often, even if they've been at a setting previously, they've often had a very big gap over the summer. So lots of settings may notice the difference in communication and language, and especially that communication and frustration around their emotions when they're starting and they're starting to, leave caregivers again. Sometimes that's really hard to communicate how you're feeling. I mean, like we talked about with adults struggling with things, this is definitely something I still feel like adults struggle to communicate their feelings and manage their emotions. And that's really hard for children. They've got so many feels, they've got a lot going on inside. And that is something that they might get very upset over because they can't translate that, and they struggle. So it might also affect their self-esteem and their confidence if they don't feel like they can express themselves in a situation with their peers or with adults. I mean, you might, probably something that I'm sure a lot of educators have noticed, if English isn't their first language, then they might notice that they're quieter, for example, because they don't know how to yet express what they want to with others and with the adults. So it can then have a little bit of a knock-on effect on their confidence and esteem, self-esteem. So that's something to kind of look out for. And like I said, kind of building those social skills, it's really difficult to develop that kind of personal, social, emotional, and interrelated development when they're struggling to communicate. They're just all so interrelated. So that's something that, again, they might find difficult. And on top of that, in many ways, development in all the other areas, because they need to understand what we're trying to communicate to them. And they need to be able to communicate back so that we know where their understanding is in order to learn. So, I mean, not to say it affects everything, but it affects everything.
Well, no, I think we're able to say that it affects everything,
Yes.
I say, because when I was learning about this at university, I've probably got the words wrong here, so if my professor's listening, I'm really sorry. The way we learn to communicate affects how we see the world. So
Yeah,
whether
100%.
I remember him saying humans have evolved in such a way that we depend on communication and language to not just like survive, but thrive, evolve, that kind of stuff. So the
Mhm.
humans have learned to evolve to categorize things, which is why we've got names for everything. We've got, details and things like that. And it's very unique to humans, like no other language, because there are, communication forms in animals. They have a ways of communicating.
Yes.
Don't go into that detail, but humans do. And, how we use communication impacts how we see the world. I remember he gave a really good example. And again, I cannot remember which language he said, but there's a language that doesn't distinguish between, I think, pink and purple.
Yes, I've heard
It's
this.
just one word for both.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. And so we as English speakers distinguish pink as a colour, purple as a colour, but when this other language uses it, it's the same word. So they essentially think it's the same thing. And of course they do, because they've categorized it into this one
Yeah.
thing. So I think we are allowed to say that it does affect
Yeah,
everything.
definitely. And even what I was saying about, almost translating their feelings, that's just like you were saying, that's why it's so hard to translate. If anyone has tried to learn another language, there's a lot of words that don't translate.
Yeah.
So obviously we've talked about how important communication and language is, but some of the things that can affect early communication skills with very young children can be things like low talk environments. So there's a very fine line, isn't there, about being swamped with language, but also the opposite of that is not having enough talk and engagement in the environment wherever they are. So it's a really fine balance, but that can obviously affect children's early language and communication skills. The other thing that I'm always really mindful of is environmental noise. So
Oh, I've not heard of that before.
yeah, so having too much environmental noise around, so young children will then find it very hard to tune in and sort of do that fine tuning. So things, if you're thinking about how attention and listening can be affected, if a child is permanently surrounded by loads of noise, they're going to find it very difficult to focus and tune in on particular sounds or being able to pick up those cues or those words that they're hearing. So things like being out in nature and having quieter time so that you're not constantly surrounded by loads of traffic noise and trying to listen to an adult's voice when there's lots of noise around, like the television. So increased environmental noise, and I think over the years that has become more and more. There just is more noise when we're out and about just because of increased traffic. Or I'll tell you an example is that I worked in a school near a very busy flight path, and it was so obvious to me that because I struggled to hear voices and stuff when the aeroplanes were zooming over to either land or take off. It was increasingly harder to sort of tune into to quieter sounds.
I feel like the world's gotten louder in general, hasn't it? I think they proved it, didn't they? That the world's gotten louder.
I'm pretty sure there's some research
Yeah,
there to say
I
to
agree. Yeah.
evidence that. So yes, there's loads of things there that in terms of increased environmental sounds that can affect early communication skills.
Yeah.
Then for younger children, I'm thinking of toddler age, lack of time to process can sometimes,
Yes.
quick, we've got to do this, and they then don't get time to be able to think something through because life is so fast. And they can get very, very frustrated when rushed or pressured to respond quickly. So that's another factor. And then I would say things like lack of stimulation, encouragement, interaction, all of these can have a big effect on children as they're developing those early skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything, isn't there? There's going to be things that are going to affect the rate in which children develop. Maybe it's just part of the developmental stage, because we've always said, haven't we, that, it's the unique child. Every child is different. They've all got different rates of learning. So it's really difficult to compare, isn't it? Because you always have that.
Really difficult.
It's not like a longing, but again, because we want to categorize naturally as humans, we try and compare to see if we can categorize, how well a child's doing or what stage of development they're in. But I think early years is so different in that way. It's that actually, it's all wibbly wobbly. It's not a straight upwards progress. It's some children get this at this point, some get it at another point, and it's just ride the wave, my friend. So
Yeah, for some children, it takes them much longer to make those vocal sounds to begin with,
yeah,
because actually they're absorbing, and that's okay to absorb and take it all in before you're ready to vocalize it. And I think that's the acceptance of all of this, isn't it? It's got to be at a child's unique stage.
exactly. And then there are also outside factors beyond anyone's control, aka COVID. Like that's massively
Yeah.
impacted our
That's such a
environments, wasn't
big.
it?
Massive.
Yeah, because we went from this, busy, fast-paced, loud life to suddenly no contact, no outside, no, and it was like
Quiet.
it was
Yeah.
eerie. The world went quiet, didn't it? I
Yeah.
Yeah, it
really
did.
noticed that I couldn't hear aeroplanes, and it was
Yeah.
spooky.
That was a bit weird, wasn't it?
That's going to have an impact, isn't it? Of course it will. And that's beyond our control. So again, it's that whole try not to, I know it's hard, but try not to compare because we're in a completely different time now. So these developmental stages for these children are going to be completely different to the ones that we went through or that we saw even the
Yeah.
previous year go through.
Yeah, and actually reflecting on the time of COVID, I think it really highlighted to everybody the power of communicating with others. And actually, it's not just about words, it's the emotional connection that you get when you talk and you engage with other people. So yeah, I think COVID was a very interesting time from that point of view, wasn't it? In terms of
Yeah.
how important it is to fully engage with others.
Mm. Okay, so again, just going like really like out there and spacey. I love it, but let's bring it back in. Let's try and bring it back in. With all of these things going on, right? What is it that we as educators can control to support the language development? What can we do? What's in our control that we can help with?
So much, I think, Shana, we can do to support children. And I think one of the powerful ways that as educators, one of the things that we can really reflect on is our environment and making it language rich in so many different ways. And I think standing back and reflecting on where talk particularly maybe is coming from, or where children enjoy communicating with others. So being really reflective on your environment and adapting it to enable.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. What does thinking about where talk comes from mean? I've not heard of that.
I always think standing back and looking at where the talk is taking place in your environment, where your high
I love
talk
doing
points
that.
are,
Oh,
is
wow.
really important, because sometimes talk and children talking amongst each other happens in the places where you would never expect them to be. And often children, when they're learning to talk or learning to communicate and practicing their language, they like to be cozy. They don't communicate fully in a whole class setting and standing in the middle, and they'll go and they'll find quieter places, maybe to practice and maybe just to talk amongst themselves as they're playing. So thinking about areas in your classroom that are high talk points and maybe areas that aren't, that you can then develop, is really, really.
I loved doing
I
that.
really like that. I've not heard that before.
I think one of the places that always strikes me as being one of the most chattiest places is probably
It's the home corner.
in the toilet.
Oh
In the toilet? No
That's true.
way.
Everyone matter, don't they? As
Yeah,
adults, we
that's so
do.
true. But also, I'd find that like as soon as you walk in, they all kind of stop. And you're like, no, 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 don't need to stop, guys.
Yeah, there with the
Having a
clipboard,
chat.
like, no, this is a great observation. What are you talking about? Continue. Like, they're looking at you like,
I always
miss.
remember the lunchtime time when they all
That's
went
so
off
true,
to go to the
actually.
toilet, and they were all chatting as they're going, and they're washing their hands and drying them, and there's chat, 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 chat going on. And then, they come back into the classroom and they're like quite quiet.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like habit, isn't it? Because they're used to being quiet in the classroom a little bit more. It depends, I feel like, what age they are.
Yeah,
Because I feel
definitely.
like when we were in the nursery, it was always the home corner. It was like such a place for conversation. I was just like, that's so funny because it just reflects almost like the home a lot of the time, where parents would talk about spending time with their children in the kitchen or whatever they were doing, and that was maybe where a lot of the conversation was happening. And then it was the same here, but whereas the sandpit, barren. absolutely barren of any conversation. Should we have a chat? No.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I wonder what it would be like if we asked like the listeners to do like a little test.
Where's your
And if
conversation happening?
yeah, like where are your most talkative places in your settings or your classrooms, and where are the quietest? It would be really interesting to find out, because I bet it's different for different settings. That is
Yeah.
such a cool thing to think about.
Yeah, sometimes,
nice.
you know, I'm just trying to think of other places. I mean, outdoors is, you know, the talk is different outdoors, isn't it? It's much
Exactly, yeah.
more active and on the go type talk, and quite loud sometimes.
Yeah. You're allowed to be
I
outside
think,
voice.
and I think that's really important to also reflect on, is the role of talk and the role of communication and how that differs in different places.
Yeah.
The negotiation skills that you might have when you're outside are different
That's
to
so
how you
true.
might. Yeah, and the social play will be different outdoors, so they'll be using different skills. So that's why the environment, when you look at it as a whole, offers different things for language in different ways. So it's important that your environment reflects that. So having cozy, quiet spaces where children have time to process and sort of reflect on their understanding and make connections, and having noisier, more active places where children can be social and negotiate and collaborate with other children. Yeah, and then having the outdoors as well. So
No, I was just thinking when you were talking about cozy spaces, it's so nice when I think children, sometimes you kind of see children like, okay, I need a moment, I'm gonna pop off by
Yeah.
myself. But also sometimes they end up talking to themselves, you know, they are looking at a book or looking at something, and it's just like they're processing out loud as well, which is quite nice because it's before they get super self-conscious of, oh, it's not regular, I suppose, to like speak out loud, but they're literally processing it out loud is really nice as well.
It is, and I was going to add on to that. It leads on quite nicely. It's not just about the external loudness or expressiveness of communication, external communication. You need spaces for internal communication, because, like you say, it's that processing time. So, do they have time where they can be alone and think? Because that is a form of communication with themselves. They're processing what's happening throughout the day. Do they have that moment to do that? You know, and it's not just, you know, always about loud and quiet. It's about expressive, receptive. Do they have places to express? Do they have places to listen? Do they have places to talk to themselves, talk to others, or just, have that internal monologue? Because processing is just as important as receiving and giving the communication, right? Look at us. I feel like we've gone bare deep today.
That's what communication language does to you. Makes you better communication with each other.
Yeah, and we could literally go on forever about it. But I think we're going to leave it on a little cliffhanger for there. I think that's a really good intro. And then next, a couple of episodes, we'll go into the ins and outs of the different age groups. Super excited about that. But before we go, my ladies, you know you can't leave me without playing a game. Like, come on. You know this.
What have you got for us?
bring it on.
You say this every time, right? It's not that bad, okay? I'm actually really proud of this game that I thought about. I was like, oh my God, I'm so clever. I can't believe I thought about this. So, does anybody here have social media?
No.
Wait, what?
I have Pinterest. That's it.
Fabulous. Oh, darn it. Okay. Does anyone have video social media? No. Oh, well, this is going to be hilarious then.
We're probably quite unusual, to be fair.
It's fine. We love it. Unique child, remember? You're both very unique. I love it.
We're special. Yeah.
But you're still going to be included. It's fine. So I was just going to try and create context to this game. I saw once on a video social media channel, there was a couple who are going through like games together and doing videos of trying out these games, so you can see what the games are like, and you just watch them and they tell you, and it's quite funny. And one of them is a game called Incoherent. Have you heard of this game?
I have heard of it.
Okay. So the premise is I'm going to speak to you in what will probably sound like to you gobbledygook. Absolute nonsense. Simlish, if you will. But you have got to try and guess
What you're trying to say.
what I mean. Yeah. So I thought this was a really cool exercise in showing the difference between hearing and listening. Because I think it's a really good game to get that distinction. So
I'm not going to lie, I'm feeling a little bit nervous now.
You were so up for it, Lou.
I was, but now I retract that because I think I'm going to find this really hard.
Oh, it's so funny though. Right, so I'm going to try my best to say these words, and all of these words are related to early years, okay?
Okay.
Amazing.
Right.
Okay.
Clue. We love a clue.
There are going to be, I'm trying to give you as many clues as I can because this is a really hard game. I tried playing it with my friends and it was just carnage. It was so funny. Right. These are all words or phrases that you might use in the early years setting.
As a child or an educator?
Both. I know. Right. Okay.
Question, Lou.
Are you ready for your first incoherent word?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Here we go. Okay. Your first word is.
I'm laughing already and I don't even know what the word is.
Oh my god. Gar-beat-wime.
What?
Gar-beat-wime.
I'm hearing garbage wine.
Garbage wine? I should certainly hope you're not saying that in your classroom, young lady.
Carpet
Lou got it! It's carpet
What did you
time!
say? Sorry. It literally...
Woohoo!
No way!
Yeah, carpet
Wow.
time.
That is impressive. I think we know who's the better educator.
No, come on.
Lou for the win.
Like you said, Julia, your feeling of communication is affecting your self-confidence. Remember, this is just gobbledygook. She might have got this one, but you might get the next one.
There's a possibility.
Gar-beat-wime is carpet time. Very good. Okay.
Wow. That was impressive. I did not get there.
Oh my god. It's so hard to read them without trying to. Right. Luta-ortal. Luta-ortal. Luta-ortal.
Water bottle?
Yeah!
Ah!
What? See? That's so hard.
I was like, Lou. Bathroom.
It's like Luta-ortal. I'm trying to, and then I sound like I'm trying to be Swedish.
Yes, you do sound like you.
It's unintentional. I apologise to every Swede that's listening. Okay, right. This one's okay. I can do this.
1-1, Julia.
Yeah, competition's on. Okay. Jite Newton. Jite Newton.
Giant?
Jite Newton. Jite Newton. I think they said as well, if you say it, maybe say it in different ways. Say it quicker, faster, slower. Does that help you?
That's not helped. It's just reminded me of
Could you
Finding
say it
Nemo.
again?
Jite Newton. Jite Newton.
Giant Newton.
Jite Newton. Jite Newton. Jite Norton. Jite Norton.
All I'm hearing is Newton.
I think maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Norton.
If people at home are like screaming the answers, come on.
They're like, what is happening? Okay, shall I tell you this one?
I think you're going to have to tell us.
Yeah, I'm stumped.
This is really hard. This one's whiteboard pen.
What?
I know.
I know. I have to say, you quite often don't end up having them working in.
Yeah, why would we use that?
Yeah. It's really not a word I use often, apart from anyone got
Oh, brilliant. Okay, this one, I love this one. Lentil sands. Lentil sands. Lentil sands. Your faces are killing me. Lentil sands. Lentil sands.
Lentil sands.
It's like all I can hear is lentil and then sand.
Exactly, because your brain's already processing.
I know, you're like
using the
right
word.
one.
Yeah, it's already trying to attach a meaning to a word that it sounds like.
It's a really good game for like empathizing with children again about language.
It is.
Like, wow,
it really is.
Really hard.
This must be what we sound like to children.
Lentil sands.
Lentil sands. Lentil sands. Lentil sands. Lentil
This one
sands.
seems like it should be easier, but I'm still not getting it.
I reckon you're going to get it. As soon as I say it, you're going to be like, oh.
Could you
Give us a
give us
clue.
a clue?
You would say this to a child who perhaps needs support with dealing with conflict.
Oh,
Lentil
something
sand.
hands. Like kind hands or
Oh.
something.
Oh,
Gentle hands.
lentil
Gentle.
hand.
Gentle hands.
gentle hands. Very good.
Oh, that was
Lou
hard.
is furious.
Yeah, she's not
I
happy.
mean, lentil hands.
No, lentil sands, gentle hands.
Hands.
How do you make
Gentle
this
hands.
game? Like, how do you get to the gobbledygook that's not so far that it's too hard to get, but it's like attainable? Do you know what I mean?
I feel like you are now criticising my
No, I'm curious.
work making this
So,
game.
like,
Look,
how
I
do
just
play
made
this
it up.
game later?
I want to do one for you, but I don't think I could even generate a word.
It's
Well,
so
this is why I'm
funny.
like,
Yeah,
how did you do it? Like, I'm curious.
I can't even remember if I'm honest with you.
She's just magic.
Or delirious.
game.
Probably the latter. This one's my favourite. I'm sorry.
Good game. Good game.
Okay.
Got another. Last one.
Vine turds. Vine turds.
Turds.
Vine turds. Vine
Just one
turds.
word.
No, it's 2 words. Vine turds, please. Vine turds.
Fine turds.
Just like hearing you say vine turds.
Finders.
Not quite.
Could you possibly say that sounds like vine turd?
How about kind words?
Oh.
Right. I know. It's easy when you know.
This is the hardest game. Actually, no, I'm not sure because we played a game before that was even harder than this. And
I do
think you had to
remember.
give up.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
this is
traumatized
hard,
you.
Though.
Okay, last one then.
All right.
Pies nom tea. Pies nom tea.
This does sound like
and
something.
tea.
Pies nom
Pie?
tea.
Pies, nom tea.
Pies
You're a
nom tea. No, how rude. I am, but that's not the quote. No. Pies
Pies.
nom tea.
Hands on knees.
Close. On
I
is
did think
correct.
about this, but I can't hear
On
the-
is correct.
On.
On is correct.
Eyes on me.
Yeah. Oh, she won the game. Oh.
Well done,
Look.
Julia.
I'm not sure she means that. Again, miscommunication. Her words are saying one thing.
Oh no,
her
she
face.
communicated very clearly with her facial expression.
I'm smiling. That's me smiling.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But yeah, well done. Wasn't that
Very well
hard?
done. That was really hard.
Congrats, guys. Congrats. Right, well, I think I've knackered you out for enough. You deserve a break.
Yeah, that was mind-bending.
I know, but this is what I mean. This is what it must be like for children who are developing language.
You're right. Great game.
Yeah.
Everyone
Really
needs to
good
play
game.
this.
Thanks.
Empathy is right there.
Other games are available. But I thought when I saw this one, I just thought it was a great one. I was like, this is actually a really cool, like, fun
It was a
concept to
good
play
game.
with.
It is great.
Good game.
Thanks very much. You don't want to kill me, so that's always great.
Well.
Until next time, ladies.
Yes, we're going to talk about babies next time.
Very
Woo.
exciting. All right then. Well, until then, have a wonderful day. I'll see you very soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, Shanna.
Well, there you go. That is the first episode finished in our mini series about communication and language. Did you play along with our incoherent game? Wasn't it difficult? If any of you guys actually have the game and you've tried it yourself, please get in contact and let me know. I love hearing things like that. And also, if you've got any other games that you would suggest we play on the next episodes, get in touch as well. We always love hearing from you. And yes, when Julia and Louise were talking about what were the maybe loudest or quietest areas in your classrooms or settings, go and have a look around and do like a mini audit of where the communication and language is taking place in your settings and let us know. I think that would be really interesting. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it and I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye-bye. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.